screen now. Can you hear now?
It looks to be COVID-19 numbers. That video, it looks like it's muted there.
Oh.
Can they hear on that one?
Oh, they can hear now.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry about that, everyone. Hi, just to reiterate, I'm Michael Beauregard from Systems Change Strategies, and today we're presenting the draft community engagement and business engagement strategy. As I previously said, we are looking at hosting 5 community engagement events over a 7-week period, with the first event slated to happen in about 2 weeks. We are looking at hosting these on weekday nights, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays between 5:30 and 7 p.m. And where we are hoping to host them is in 5 different geographic neighborhoods across Providence. Go to the next slide, Angela. So we're looking at providing some break in between each. So we're doing 2 in succession and then taking a break, 2 in succession, taking a break. So giving ourselves ample time to schedule and prepare these events, as well as get folks from those respective communities to attend. We're looking at having our first one towards the end of August in the North End, and we would be partnering with the NAACP Providence branch to make that happen. Moving down the schedule, we're looking at hosting one in the far west of the city, Silver Lake, Olneyville, and Hartford, partnering with the Latino Policy Institute on that event. Then taking a break for some of our business engagement events, which we'll get into in a moment, and then resuming in September for a series of 2 events, one for the downtown east side part of town, and that will be facilitated with Facilitate Change, and then another for West End Federal Hill, partnering with DARE, Direct Actions for Rights and Equality. And then finally, we would take another break for a business engagement event, and our last one would occur the week of October 1st in partnership with Arise and with focus on the South Providence portion of the city. And then, sorry, Peter, I saw you have a question. Just what we're seeking task force input on is both, we would love to have task force members present, keeping in mind open meetings limitations. So we're hoping to have at least 2 to 3 task force members present to really hear from the community at these events. And we also would welcome recommendations for additional community organizations that we would want to get the word out through, as well as recommendations for locations. So we are currently pursuing locations for all of the events because we know that we're under a tight time constraint. Peter, you had a question?
The dates that you have up there are Fridays, so it's kind of if it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, would be prior to those days, is that right?
That's correct. So the 3 days prior to those dates. We did build this off of the task force schedule, which is convening on Fridays, but it would be the 3 days, calendar days prior. And just so how you know how that kind of lines up with the task force, we are hoping that the output of those events is presented to the task force the following week. So we wouldn't get it on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. We would not be presenting those on the Friday. We would be presenting it the following week, so that we have time to condense those, compile those, and provide a report to the task force for each of those events. Questions, Oscar?
No, sir.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
What are the roles of the community partners that are listed?
So the community partners will primarily be charged with assisting with communication, with getting community members to those events, as well as being on hand to assist with facilitation the day of and helping make sure that the community's voice is heard throughout the process. So they'll really be, I think, working hand in hand with community members to advocate for what is brought up in those conversations. I think there's still a bit of conversation to be had about the facilitation structure, which we hope to present next week, so folks know what these will look like, but we're still in conversations with the city, with the co-chairs, and with our community partners to develop that approach.
And I have a follow-up question, if you want. Do we have any centralized resources, or is there something that we're providing to make sure that all of these meetings have kind of a through line, or?
Definitely. Actually, if I can just hold on that and get a little farther into the presentation, we'll talk about the ways that community members can participate.
Okay.
You go to the next slide.
Okay, no, my question was around that.
Oh.
Participation of the members.
And so just to round out our engagement, we are looking to have some focused conversations with businesses as well through this process. And the way we thought best to break that up was to have one focus specifically on small businesses and then another focused on anchor or large businesses in the city. We know that the needs of those 2 separate sectors are quite varied. You can see there's some proposed industries for the small businesses, including corner store owners, grocers, business services like CPAs, lawyers, et cetera, restaurants, bars, and nightlife. And then on the anchor business side of things, we're looking at potentially working with hospitality, tourism, technology, higher education, health and medicine. As you can see, what we need from task force members, we are also welcoming input on additional target industries, as well as key business leaders that we would want to involve in those roundtable discussions. Any questions on this slide before we move forward? Next slide, please. And so what we're hoping to do through these processes is really communicate a common set of ways that community members can participate. So first and foremost, we will have a survey, which we unfortunately don't have finalized yet, so as soon as we do, we will share that. It's really seeking to line up with the ways we've been thinking about issues and getting community input electronically as well as in person. So there will be paper versions of that survey available at all the community events, as well as working with partner organizations across the city. Additionally, obviously, the community conversations that we're hoping to host are really the best way if you have an idea or something that you think really needs to be prioritized to elevate that idea. Additionally, though, we are going to continue going forward, have a 10-minute public comment period at the end of all of these task force meetings for folks from the community to come and speak directly to you if the community conversation in their neighborhood is not convenient to attend. As well, we're going to encourage folks to talk to their elected officials in the city about the things that they would like to see ARPA funds prioritized for. And then finally, folks will have the opportunity to both apply for funds as well as participate in a program. Next slide, please. Next slide again. So any questions from the task force or recommendations for things that we haven't considered in this approach?
I have a question on last bullet. You said apply for funds. I want to learn more about your thoughts on that.
I think that refers to implementation of recommendations. Okay. So this is like across the longitude of these efforts. So I don't think that that's something that's immediately going to be available. Okay. It's something that I think we want to be consistent in our communications with community members around the ranges of ways that they can participate from the beginning, so that if they're not interested in an idea, but they are interested in benefiting from programs that will be funded through ARPA funds, that they're aware that that's coming down the pike. Okay.
I also think, I know that with our funds that the council already approved a $7 million small business fund, so I don't know what's happening with the implementation of that, but it may be if there's some information available once those meetings are happening, then using that as a chance to let people know there are some initial immediate programs that were already established, and it's a chance to know that those things are already done, and how we can start with that.
Excellent point. Definitely thinking about that. I think we're still a little bit in the ways of thinking through implementation on some of those first tranche programs, but as soon as they are available, we'd love to publicize them and give people information after them.
What will be the procedure for the task force members to engage with you? You will contact each one, or we should send an email?
So we will be sending a survey to task force members following today. I apologize, we said we were going to send one last week, but then subsequent to the meeting, the approach changed a little bit. So we're going to send you something either today or Monday at the latest with a survey. It will be a very brief survey for your input on when you would like to attend one of these meetings. We would love for you to attend at least one of them if you can, to hear directly from the community. We will also take recommendations for business leaders who need to be included in the roundtable discussions and target industries. I would say if you don't see a space in the survey for information, Oscar and Angie, we're going to be in close communication throughout this process, but for any task force member, if there's something that doesn't fit into a space within the survey, shoot us an email directly off of that email, and we will take that recommendation and try to do our best ability to implement it.
Okay, thank you.
What's the role of digital marketing and outreach in the portion about community?
Great point. I'm going to defer because we're just about to talk about communication strategy, and I think that might be a better time to talk.
Okay, so in this point, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I thought you were done.
Oh, I just had a note about the date for the key industries or target industries that, like hospitality, I know Monday night is often like a night that many venues, restaurants, and bars are closed. Yeah. And so Monday may be a note for restaurant and nightlife.
Great point. And just to be clear, I don't think we were necessarily thinking that the business discussions would be the same times, right? Because you probably would do it during business hours most likely.
I noticed retail was not there, and a lot of people affected by the pandemic were frontline workers in retail.
Noted.
Adding on to that, I know a lot of frontline workers in manufacturing, so production, both in terms of that and then also production was a major one, so food workers is a huge area.
And then in terms of impacted workers, question about the business engagement side of things, that there's not necessarily this, there's similarities, but very different perspectives and very different impacts between business owners and people who work in those industries. And if the roundtables are designed around business leaders, the voices of workers will be lost in that, and there needs to be a separate space for workers in those industries, if that's not specifically part of the community session outside of that.
That's a good point. We'll definitely try to figure out how we can incorporate those perspectives throughout the process.
One of the things that just came to mind based upon Julian's comment is another industry that's impacted is early care, early education. And I know education is separate, but I'm not clear on how much the K through 12 education also includes the early childhood task community as well too. So I want to be sure we flag that.
That's a great point, and I know we have discussed in both the survey as well as in our community engagement, how do we incorporate recommendations around early education as well as education, keeping in mind the school has a separate process, or schools have a separate process going on as well as a separate funds for those. So I think to the extent that we can collect that information and share it with our partners in education would be.
So for example, the school, there's funding for like the school district, right? But that funding isn't really for early education, except to the extent that the school district funds any or like, you know what I mean? So I think it's probably the money from the school, unless I'm mistaken, my sense is the money from the school district is for PTSD. It's not for private, and because the only public kind of early education we have is like Head Start, Michigan, and how we can get that money for, pre-K programs, but most preschool and everything is really totally separate from the school district, I think, so.
Yeah, I think there's some of this that we might need to just collect the information people are sharing and then synthesize and then figure out what to do with it afterwards, because I don't think we're going to have an answer on that right away, but I do agree that's an important distinction to keep in mind as we're collecting that information. Any other questions? Time's up.
Sorry, just one more plug-in for the early learning. We want to make sure we include family child care and center-based child care, and not forget that child care is a work support for all of these other industries.
Thank you.
There's an infrastructure bill federally that's being considered at the moment, and my understanding is that it may or may not include, and so perhaps that might be coming down the road.
Okay. So, you finished? Okay. So, because we don't have quorum, so there is no approval, there is no vote.
Yeah.
So, but if you have, any of you have any additional comment, please feel free to reach out or send an email to us. Okay? So, following our agenda, let's go with the third topic, ARP recommendation communication strategy, external affairs and SEC.
So I'll start, and I have a document that I'm passing around that I'll reference. I had sent it, email, but now I'm going to email it here. You need to go over this.
Thank you. One sheet?
Yeah.
So as we think about, I'll start. Teresa going in, Chief of External Affairs. For those who I haven't met, she, her pronouns. I am joined. Jack, my colleague in communications, is on the line as well as an attendee, and I want to acknowledge and recognize Jack is leading a lot of this work, but I'm here today. So what we have in front of you is meant to just be a guiding document for us. As we think about launching a public campaign about rescue plans, it's really important that our survey, our community meetings, our Facebook ads, whatever it is, we're all speaking the same language. A lot of this is really complex. There's federal, state, city, and so we really want to make sure that we're all trying to speak the same language. It takes someone at least hearing something 7 times before it starts to really seep in. So this is just meant to be a guiding document that will help inform all of these other pieces. Development of a website, and everything that we hope to launch as part of a campaign. So what you see in front of you are some core messages.
that we want to share with you and community members. So again, it's meant to be a guide, and want to see if you have any feedback on this, and of course, we're willing to take that from others beyond this meeting. This is meant to be the first of many conversations, so we do that before we launch a survey and a website. We really wanted to make sure that we were at least going down the right path. Everything from, some people describe this as the Recovery Act and Rescue Plan. That, again, causes confusion for our community members, so we want to make sure, we're all saying Rescue Plan, not Recovery Act. So all of these small moments that we have in front of members of our community, we want to make sure that we're really being as intentional in our framing as possible. And trying to be as concise as possible. Again, this is really heavy stuff, so, trying to keep each message to under 21 words and as simple as possible is really important. And so I won't go through each section that's outlined in front of you, but just to explain the thinking. So there are really three components when we're thinking about how we're going to publicly engage with folks. So there's the why are we going forward, how, what is happening, and then how, talking about that community engagement that we're all spearheading here. And so I'll pause there and take feedback and any questions. And again, this is just meant to be a guiding tool so that when we're building all of these other pieces, when we're writing the talk points, if you want to provide 5 minutes at a community meeting, whatever that is, we're all using the same messaging so that we can make sure that our community members are, starting to hear this drumbeat that sounds the same throughout the next 3 years. I'll pause there and also just acknowledge, obviously this is in English, this would be translated, and this would be, as we develop graphics or online material, a website that we'll launch will be launched in the 5 top spoken languages in the city of Providence. But again, before we finalize the content for a website, we wanted to just get a sense from task force members, are we thinking about this in the right way? Is there anything that we're missing? And this is, again, just meant to be a guiding tool. There will be other pieces that we talk about, but, just want to check in with folks and get your feedback. We'll make sure to send this to other task force members who are present today, of course.
I have a comment in the what column, the last key supporting information point, 2.3. The funding has already been allocated to economic relief. It could be a little bit confusing for some people in the community.
Yeah.
People say, okay, I didn't know about that, I haven't received nothing, so it's something that maybe should be clarified.
Clarify that it's, some funding is not all the funding, yes.
And I'm looking at this really quickly, and I'm not sure if I'm missing it. I think part of the messaging that we've received is that this is for long-term sustainable solutions.
Yeah.
And at a quick glance, I don't see that here, because the impression I don't want to give members of the community is that, one, is that this is over the course of 3 years. I think I saw that in here quickly.
Yeah.
But two, this is not necessarily for programs, but looking at sustainable solutions that impact those disproportionately impacted by COVID.
Yeah, that's a great point, that we forgot that.
And the 3.3.
Yes.
When you say democracy only works when we engage, maybe it could be more specific with government, leaders, and community engage and to work together.
Yeah.
To not miss this opportunity. It's like more direct message.
Yeah, I like that.
Sabrina?
I also think sharing this, I don't know how we all feel, but sharing this with the outlined community organizations, their feedback, just to see if there's anything that they would use as a resource that's not listed here.
Absolutely.
And you said this will get translated in 5 languages. What are the top 5 in Providence?
So it's English, Spanish, Portuguese, Khmer,
Of course, the fifth one's gonna get Creole.
Was it Mandarin?
What is it?
Was it Mandarin or Creole?
I think it's Portuguese/Creole, Khmer, and then maybe it's Mandarin.
Okay.
It's what our website functionality allows now, so our current website, for the city of Providence already does this, so it's, Arabic,
Arabic.
yeah.
Okay.
This is super helpful. So in terms of next steps, we're gonna, add in some of the feedback around long-term sustainable solutions, include how we want to explain democracy as like government leaders, community working together, sharing this with community partners. And then we're gonna start just using this to build, add into the survey, create a website, start getting flyers put together as we finalize community meetings. So that's where you'll see this language used. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda, the item number 4 is a presentation from the planning department. We are expecting the director of planning, Bonnie Nickerson. She's not here at the moment, is she? Oh, I love that. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing, Bonnie?
Just fine. Nice to see you.
Pleasure to see you as well. So the floor is yours for your presentation on your department.
Great. Thank you. I believe the presentation is loaded up somewhere.
Somebody pulling it up? Oh, she's going to pull it up. Angela, do you pull it up or does Bonnie pull it up?
I think she has ability to,
Okay, so she has the whole?
yep,
Okay.
she can share. Just let me know if you can't.
Oh, okay. Sure. Is everyone able to see that?
You are.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thanks so much for the opportunity to present today. I just wanted to focus on kind of, instead of doing a broad overview of all of the stuff that our department is involved in, I really wanted to focus on public space, investments in climate resiliency and green infrastructure. So I'm just going to narrow in on that and kind of break that into 2 different categories. So one is downtown investments. We'll talk about that. And then I'm going to give some examples of some proposed neighborhood investments that we'd like the group to consider. So before we go into proposed projects, I just wanted to talk about what our priorities are for thinking about what might be a good fit for this opportunity. So we're really looking at projects that address multiple challenges and consider these multiple opportunities. So creating safe and healthy outdoor spaces for our residents, really thinking about how to create the most vibrant, high quality public realm in our city, building climate resilient infrastructure and building infrastructure that kind of addresses the climate crisis and climate change, and then investing in green infrastructure. So basically sort of looking at all of our projects, what hits as many of these categories as possible. And those are the priorities that we focused on. So for downtown, I want to talk about one of the projects we've been working on over the past several months, which is this project called the Unified Vision for Downtown Providence. So you all may have heard a little bit about it over the past 8 months or so. We've really been working on how to improve the public gathering space in our city center and rethink Water Place Park in light of the impacts of flooding and rising tides. So during this process, we realized that the existing tunnels to get to Water Place Park and the river walks flood twice a month and several times a year in a way that those spaces are not even usable. So, when we think about climate change and we think about something happening in the future, the impacts of that are here with us today, and we really have to think about how we are going to rebuild our infrastructure in light of the current day realities. So for this project, we've already done a very robust public design process. We have preliminary engineering and design now complete. So we're at what's called the 30% design stage. So we've done quite a bit of work on this project. And one of the big challenges for us was, how do we engage the public? And I just listened to you all think about this very same thing, but how do we meaningfully engage our community during the pandemic? That was one of the big things that we were working with. And how do we expand who participates in our process? So we, I think, had a very successful engagement. We had thousands of comments from community meetings, stakeholder meetings with an incredible diverse array of groups. We did youth workshops, on-site interviews, just spending time out in the space and talking with folks. We did online surveys, and then business engagement through targeted workshops and targeted business surveys. So this is just to give you just a little bit of a flavor of what that was like. So you can see here we had breakout groups in our virtual meetings, where we had literally hundreds of people in these virtual meetings and broke out into rooms and had, you know, all kinds of tools to really get as much feedback as possible from our community. And then we really broke that down into themes. So we were able to kind of synthesize all of these comments into a series of themes and actions and strategies. So just to kind of, again, give you a very quick snapshot of what that was like, thinking about programming, nature and resilience, equity and agency and access, mobility improvements, and youth and play. So those were kind of our big broad themes. And then we distilled all the information down into kind of all of the information that informed our design. So these are kind of the big moves that we're proposing. I won't go into the great details here, but just so you all get a sense, we're talking about closing the tunnels that connect Water Place Park to Greater Kennedy Plaza, again, due to flooding. And those just are not going to be a safe way to connect these public spaces. So we're proposing to build a new connection that's an elevated connection across. We're really thinking about rebuilding Water Place Park, the basin, and then making some improvements to Kennedy Plaza itself. So this is just, again, giving you a very quick snapshot of what that looks like. This gives you a very clear sense of where the existing Riverwalk is today. You can see that that's that lower level 4 at elevation +4. And in the next few decades, we really need to be 5 feet higher than we are today, just to be, just to stay ahead of where sea level rise is going to be on the Riverwalks. So this was kind of a sobering exercise for us to really look into the science and to design in accordance to that science. So these are just some renderings that we did through the project. Again, thinking about this space as a holistic improvement to the downtown and to the downtown network of public spaces. And I'm, like I said, won't go into all of the detailed project elements here, but just to give you an overview, I'm really thinking about how do we activate these spaces, make the spaces welcoming and accessible for everyone in our community. And just a note about project phasing. So we imagine this project being broken into multiple phases, and we would like to think about doing a phase 1 investment. We have some dollars through our capital improvement program, and what we're hoping to do is combine some federal resources to do a meaningful phase 1. We also are planning to pursue federal funding through the very soon to be infrastructure bill, particularly for the Water Place Park and Water Place Basin and Riverwalks portion. In light of the climate resiliency feature, we think that our federal delegation may see that as an attractive project to invest in. So I am going to shift gears now and move over to some neighborhood project examples. So again, really thinking about which projects kind of hit multiple goals. So thinking about creating public open space, addressing climate resilience, and investing in green infrastructure, One of the projects that jumps out to us came out through our Woonasquatucket River Vision Plan that we did a few years ago. We've actively been implementing this plan ever since then. And this project is thinking about acquiring a site. It's down here in the lower right-hand corner, right at the end of Tuxedo Avenue in the Olneyville section of Providence. It's currently a car parts salvage yard. And what we're thinking of doing is acquiring that site, really building what we call kind of a flood park community space, community open space. So because of the location, I'll go back to this, but you can see this is kind of the existing floodplain of the Woonasquatucket River. And you can see right down in that corner is where there's kind of a double bend in the river. Back in 2010, this was an area of extreme flooding for this area. So what we were really looking at, what are the most strategic acquisitions we could do to make the biggest difference? And so this site really jumps out. So like I said, extreme flooding in the area. And what we want to do is basically naturalize, take from a contaminated site, which is used as car salvage parts, and really transform that into a natural area that can absorb floodwater and be what we're calling the sort of floodplain park for the community. It's also right behind the Gotham Greens investment, and we are currently building out a section of the bike path there. So it's really an opportunity to continue that further into the neighborhood. And so we think this is a really interesting opportunity here. I'm not going to read all of this information. I wanted to include it in the presentation so you guys can have this as part of your record to refer back to if you had any questions or wanted some additional information on the projects. So moving on to another example, this is in the Wanskuck neighborhood. So what we're proposing to do here is create a new public open space in the neighborhood that in this neighborhood, there's not a lot of parkland. And this is an interesting opportunity because it's already owned by the city. This is a PRA owned parcel. It's a total of about 25 acres of land. And you may remember this is the former American Tourister manufacturing site that burned down about 25 years ago or so. And it was blighted and eventually got transferred over to the Providence Redevelopment Agency. And we have since divided this into two parcels. You can see the shaded parcel here is the parcel that we're talking about building a new publicly owned park for the neighborhood. It's about 15 acres of land. And you can see here on the image, it includes Whipple Pond. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but it's a really stunningly beautiful part of Providence. If you have never been there, you should go explore it. It's kind of this idyllic little spot that's already quite beautiful. And what we'd like to do is really develop it as conservation land. So what we're talking about doing is some site cleanup, improving the existing trail system, and really develop this as an area for passive recreation for the neighborhood. As I said, we already own the land. So what we would be doing is really investing in it to create an accessible open space and improve the sort of natural environment of the area. Again, I'm not going to read the info, but it's all here if you want to refer to it or look up some additional information. And then the last slide I wanted to talk to you all about as an example of these types of projects that we're interested in is down off of Allens Avenue on Public Street. So very recently, the CRMC voted to designate this a public right-of-way. And so what we'd like to do is create a new public access point right on the bay. This was a priority that was identified by the city's climate justice plan, and it's been really supported by the Racial and Environmental Justice Committee. So it's been a priority for a long time to develop more of these small pocket parks and create more access to the waterfront. So I think as everybody knows, after you leave the downtown and head south along the waterfront, there's almost no opportunity to have public access. And so this is our intent, is to do some environmental cleanup at this location, some site improvements, and actually create a public access point for the neighborhood and for the community. And that's been a priority for a long time. So it was really a kind of a win when CRMC recently did designate this as a public right-of-way, public access point. Some additional information here in case anyone would like to go back to the presentation. And that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to talk about questions or if anyone wants some additional information.
Questions? Julian? And Peter?
Thank you for the presentation, Bonnie. Try to keep this brief. We've got questions around a number of them, but I think for the first one and the last one that you shared, the first one, there's been a lot of contention around kind of the future of Kennedy Plaza and the state's plans versus the city's plans and kind of how that lines up. And a lot of the public engagement around just the importance of Kennedy Plaza as a bus hub and maintaining that, and just wanted to kind of frame kind of what the thinking is around maintaining and improving public transit access as a climate justice priority itself, public transit being a key importance of that, and not having kind of climate priorities lead towards gentrification or pushing out poor people or people of color from spaces. So that's one question, and then the other one around Allen's Ave, involved with that project just a little degree. In addition to the right-of-way and the public access point, wondering if there's any look at Allen's Ave itself in terms of the improvements. Just getting to that place can be dangerous, especially for people who aren't in cars. So anyone walking, biking, trying to access it in other ways. In terms of just the truck traffic, the scrap along the side of the road, and the speed of vehicles traveling there. And so wondering if that's also part of that, or if it's really just looking specifically at that little strip of public street, or the kind of the connection to get there to and from.
Yeah, thank you. On the first question, going back to the Kennedy Plaza process, as you're well aware, the kind of parallel process that the state has been going on through this kind of multi-hub investment was ever present as part of our process. I think at some point we just said, we need to make a plan of how we are going to invest in the center of Providence and the public space in the center of Providence while maintaining a very robust transit presence. So we worked with DOT and RIPTA to identify the locations of where those buses could be. And based on the plans that both RIPTA and RIDOT have, we feel like we've provided a scalable space for buses. So as the state decides what it's doing with the multi-hub, we've allocated a number of locations for buses so that we could scale that number up or down, kind of depending on what ultimately the state decides with the multi-hub. So we were a little bit ahead of the state in our planning. The state, as you know, hasn't started its public process yet. So we have reserved quite a number of berths so that there would be space for RIPTA. One of the priorities that we said from the very beginning is that Greater Kennedy Plaza should always be a major hub for transit. It always has been since the 1600s, and it should be, because it is the center of gravity of our downtown. Is where people need to go for work, for business, for healthcare, for to visit City Hall, to visit the courthouse, and it should always be a major transit hub. And that is a priority for the city. For the Allen's Ave question, we couldn't agree more that Allen's Ave is not hospitable to folks, even driving. It's really, really challenging, and that is something that we are constantly thinking of and working with our partners at RIDOT. For this particular group and for this particular presentation, we were thinking about how to potentially use federal funds to invest in that new public access point, and not thinking so much about a larger project of the roadway itself. But we are certainly working on that on a sort of parallel track, but it wouldn't be in front of this group.
The only other thing I would ask, is I'm sure everybody that meets with us has a number of priorities, and based upon the resources being dedicated to those disproportionately impacted during COVID, how would you rank and prioritize these projects, keeping in mind those disproportionately impacted by COVID and the impact it could have on them long term?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important discussion, and it sounds like that will be part of your process and your community engagement process with the community. I would just note that in the legislation for these funds, climate resilience, green infrastructure, and investing in open space was very clearly a priority. And so I do think it's an opportunity for us to make some strategic long-term investments that are going to improve the health of the city of Providence.
Peter?
Hi, Bonnie. I wanted to ask a different question off the topic of what you presented on. Just to ask about in the prior ARP funds that the council approved, I know that there was $500,000 for a homelessness intervention. I just wanted to know if the planning department is involved in the implementation of that. It's listed as grant to nonprofits, so I wasn't sure. But if there's any update as to what's happening with that you would be able to share.
Yeah, sure. I actually just came from a meeting on that topic. The administration is leading that effort through the mayor's policy office in conjunction with the city council. So I can just report back that there's a lot of collaboration happening around that allocation. I believe that this group has a presentation planned September 3rd, one on kind of emergency housing supports and then on longer term housing supports. And I will be back in September to talk a little bit more about housing investments. But there's really nothing concrete to report, just to note that it is a challenge that is very real, and folks are working very hard to figure out how to best utilize those funds to address the immediate crisis.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Bonnie, for your presentation.
Thank you all.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you in a couple more weeks. The fifth item on our agenda is public comment. Now, if we have any comments from the public. We have one comment? Oh, somebody raised their hand, an attendee. That's us?
Allowed to talk.
Yeah.
I think he's allowed.
Allowed to talk.
Allowed to talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondering, will this information be available online, or how will we get it for the PowerPoints and the other information?
Hold on one second. Would you be able to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Richard
For the
Lappin.
record?
Yes.
Richard
My name
Grafton?
is Richard Lappin. Lappin, L-A-P-P-I-N.
L-A-P-P-I-N, Richard Lappin, L-A-P-P-I-N.
Yes.
Yes, the documents will be available online on the city. Can you direct me where they are on the city?
Open meeting portal.
Open meeting portal.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem, Richard.
Nice presentations.
Thank you. There's Sharon.
Yes,
Good afternoon, Sharon.
good afternoon. Sharon Steele, President of the Jewelry District Association. I have several questions. The first of which, most of these are process questions. Since this is a public meeting, and since it is not clear who is here from the committee, who is here from the staff, who is here from the public. both names and numbers. And what was the process to literally inform anyone who wanted to either hear or participate in this meeting? It did not come on the Secretary of State's website until literally yesterday. And I understand from the call I made this morning that the minutes from the first meeting are still not posted, and it will probably be an additional week. And the questions that I'm asking you for today's meeting, since this is a public meeting, also pertain to last week's meeting. Who was here from the committee? Who from the staff? Who from the public? Names and numbers. And what is the process going forward so that people have at least a week's notice for these meetings in order to adjust their schedules accordingly?
So I'm going to try, thank you, Sharon. I'm going to try and answer some of your questions. I might need some help with the staff from some of the other questions. We did a roll call at the beginning of this meeting, which listed all the staff members, all the task force members. And so that will be that is part of the record. It was part of the record last week. It will be part of the record this week. The meetings, according to the open meetings law, are 48 hours or 72 hours? 48 hours. They're posted on the Secretary of State's website, and so we have to adhere to that law, and we do. They were posted maybe Wednesday morning. I'm sorry, Wednesday morning. The meeting notification goes out. We're required by law to make sure that they're available at least 48 hours, and so by Wednesday morning, they were posted for this week, and the same for last week as well. And the meeting minutes from last week, can you speak to the notes for last week and the week prior? They need to be approved. Okay, who are they approved by?
They approved by, I believe, the meeting, as they approved, they will be posted.
Okay.
The audio is on the portal.
Okay.
You can hear the audio.
Okay.
It is on
the open meeting portal? So the open meeting portal has the voice minutes from last week, but the meeting minutes have to be approved, so they haven't been noted yet. And Peter, you were going to say something?
I was just going to add that from having attended right before we started this last Friday, the Attorney General's open meeting presentation, annual presentation, that we're required to finalize those minutes within 35 days.
Correct.
Which Sharon may be familiar with. I think that the other thing is just to point out that we've discussed, and if they change, but that we discussed an intention to meet every Friday at noon, so we could be aware of that. And also that we discussed earlier in the meeting a broader kind of opportunity to go out proactively and get community input. So I think that's important, that yes, people can attend and should attend these meetings, but also that there's going to be opportunities in the evening for people to give more input that we're seeking as well.
So that I understand, did you say that you will be meeting every Friday at noon?
Yes, that's the schedule going forward.
And the minutes for the meeting, though one has 35 days, what is the plan?
The plan is the chief of the office is reviewing the minutes, and they will be posted, but the audio is available as we speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? That was it? Okay. Well, since we don't need a motion to adjourn the meeting, do we? No? Okay. Well, unless anybody has any further questions or comments, our meeting is over. Thank you, everyone, for.
Thank you, everyone.